The markets open at 9:30. I know that. I've known that since I was 24 years old, standing in a training room at First Boston, learning to read the tape off a Quotron terminal that smelled like hot plastic. But knowing a fact and not being able to stop your nervous system from running the pre-market checklist anyway, those are different problems. It's 11:30 on a Sunday night. I'm sitting on the windowsill of my studio in Weehawken, legs crossed, back against the frame, chamomile going cold on the ledge beside me. And Manhattan is right there, 480 feet across the Hudson. I measured it once, because that's the kind of thing I do now instead of trading. I pay $1,800 a month for this view, which is more than I probably should, given everything. But when I had to let go of the penthouse in Tribeca, the house in Southampton, the 45-foot Hatteras I'd named after Suzanne, this was the one thing I decided I needed to keep. The ability to see it without pretending it wasn't there. I've been doing that for 7 years, looking at Manhattan, not being in it. I had one rule. Every trader has rules. Risk management is the job, not the analysis, not the insight, not the view, the discipline. And mine was simple. Cut the loss at 8%. The position moves against you more than 8%, you exit. No averaging down. No, it'll come back. No, I just need to wait for the thesis to play out. You exit, you document, you move on. I taught that to every analyst who ever sat across from me at Demasio Capital. Said it in 3 separate CNBC appearances. Page 14 of our pitch deck. Exit the losers at 8. The market doesn't care what you paid. I ran a $140 million book for 9 years on that principle. The only trade I never closed was the one that cost me everything. It didn't start as a trade. It started as a Christmas party. December 1995. First Boston, 47th floor. Maybe 40 people from the prop desk had already cycled through the men's bathroom in groups of 3 or 4. Casual, like a scheduled rotation, before Craig Hollander came and found me at the bar. Craig was a VP, 41, the kind of man who'd been right about so many things that being wrong had simply become a theoretical concept to him. He looked at me and said, "Bobby, you work harder than anyone down here. You should feel as good as you look." 2 lines on the back of the toilet lid. I felt like the building had been sitting on my chest for 4 months and someone had just removed it. That was it. That was the entire thing. I used maybe 10, maybe 12 times a year for the next 12 years. Year-end events, the occasional Saturday before a blowout quarter. Nothing that interfered, nothing I couldn't account for. What changed was September 2008. The market fell 17% in 9 trading days. I was short the financials. We were actually positioned correctly. But the volatility, the information vacuum, the investor calls where people who'd trusted me were calling from their lake houses in Westchester, asking if they were going to be okay. I started waking up at 4 in the morning with my chest already running. And I remembered what it felt like to not have that problem. 2 lines before the pre-market open, 6:45 a.m. That's where the trade opened. There's a word they used for it on the street in those years, a tool, not a substance, not a drug, a tool. The serious people used it seriously, and the amateurs went sideways with it, and the difference was discipline. I was disciplined. I kept informal mental logs, even as it went from 200 milligrams before the open to 200 at noon and 200 before the afternoon calls, and another line before I tried to sleep. I was serious about it. I had a system. The system by 2015 was 3 to 4 grams per day. Marcus Reyes. I'll say his name because he deserves to be named. 38 years old, drove my car for 4 years. By 2013, I was paying him $8,000 a month in transportation fees. We both understood the arrangement. He was more careful with me than I was with myself. I told myself I wasn't dependent because I was functioning. I was running a fund. I was making decisions. I was on television. And then Jason Liu came to see me. Jason was 31. Best read on Asian macro I'd ever hired. He had this way of holding his pen very still when he was about to say something he'd rehearsed. In March of 2014, he sat down across from my desk and held the pen very still and said, "Bobby, I can't work like this anymore." I told him he was burning out, offered him a raise. He cleaned out his desk on a Friday, didn't say goodbye to anyone. Here's the moment. 3:47 a.m., February 2016. I'm at the desk in the Tribeca office, 2 screens up, $6.2 million in open positions on the yuan dollar cross. I don't remember opening those positions. I go through the ticket blotter, trying to reconstruct my own logic, and what I find is a series of entries, timed 11:40 p.m., 12:18 a.m., 1:03 a.m., 3 separate add-ons to the same thesis, with no corresponding notes in the trade log. Nothing, just the entries and the positions, sitting there like a conversation I'd had with myself that I couldn't remember having. I looked at the monitors on the side of the desk. They were dark, and my reflection was in them. I sat there for 40 minutes. Then I closed all the positions simultaneously. No sequencing, no orderly exit. Just close everything all at once. The single least defensible way to exit a $6 million book. And I knew that, and I did it anyway. I lost $890,000 in that exit. Not because the thesis was wrong, because of how I left. I drove home. I didn't document it. I didn't tell anyone. For 3 weeks I told myself it was an outlier. One bad night. That was the only trade in 22 years I couldn't explain in front of a whiteboard. The SEC opened an inquiry in early 2017. 3 positions. I knew all 3 were clean. I couldn't reconstruct the reasoning. Not because the trades were wrong, because somewhere between 2013 and 2017, the documentation of my own thinking had become unreliable in ways I hadn't noticed until someone asked me to produce it. I'd been trusting a kind of clarity that it turns out wasn't mine. I closed Demasio Capital voluntarily in April 2017. I called each of my 22 employees individually. I don't remember most of those calls. The scepter repair was August 2018. 9 days of medically supervised detox in White Plains, 2 weeks before I closed the fund. The cardiologist monitors the palpitations every 6 months. The anhedonia is the part that's hardest to explain to someone who hasn't had it. It's not sadness, it's not depression the way people picture it. It's more like someone lowered the ceiling on everything by 40% and then took away the ladder. I can feel things. I can feel satisfaction when I walk along the Hudson in the mornings. But the ceiling is where the ceiling is now, and my neurologist says that's consistent with long-term dopamine receptor downregulation, and I should be realistic about what that means. Suzanne filed in October 2018. Melissa texts me once a week. Gina hasn't responded to anything since 2019. I have 2 grandchildren I know by name and by photograph. Jason Liu has coffee with me once a month at a diner on Washington Street in Hoboken. He's the most honest person I know. He never says he warned me. He doesn't have to. I still carry the clasp. The Patek Philippe, reference 5130, yellow gold, bought in 2004 when the fund crossed 100 million. The clasp broke in early 2017, and I never had it repaired. When the buyer came to appraise it, I slipped the clasp into my left pocket without thinking. $22,000 for the watch. The clasp was broken, so they didn't count it. It's been in my left pocket every day since. I take it out sometimes and hold it in my palm, feeling the weight of something that couldn't be sold. 7 years, 4 months, 6 days. The markets open at 9:30. I'll be at the window, watching the pre-market on the laptop. Not trading, just watching. The same way I watch everything now, from this side of the river, with the ceiling where the ceiling is, holding something small and broken that I couldn't bring myself to leave behind. I had one rule. I wonder sometimes if Craig Hollander thinks about it. He's in Greenwich now. I see him occasionally on Bloomberg. He still looks like he's never been wrong about anything.